presence in my life. Anyway, we got to Spitting Image. That was good. I got money from that. But the next year, now here's where things take a change. 1985, I'm still playing pub rock and not got much money. Then out of the blue, my friend Paul Kriwaczek phoned. Now I told you about Kriwaczek. The Kriwaczek, I can't even say. Kriwaczek string organ. Cat Stevens, 1970, 71, whenever that was. 70, I think. 71. Tees and the Firecat. I'd always kept in touch with Paul. Paul was very special to me. We've become very, very close friends. Man with a brain the size of a planet. He'd been a dentist. He met his wife, Jeanette. He either met her in Kenya or maybe they went out together. She was a dental nurse and he'd been a dentist there. And they married. They came back. Paul was from Vienna. He was had lived through the time of the Holocaust but had got out. His name was actually, as I found out after he died, Yitzhak bin Ephraim, or Ephraim bin Yitzhak. That was his name, I think. But I only found that out after his Jewish funeral. He was not a religious Jew. He was a Jew and proud of it. Jeanette was a Catholic and proud of it. They were lovely. They were a great couple with great kids. Anyway, Paul got in touch. By then he was a senior executive producer at the BBC. Now I knew this because over the years that I'd always been in touch with him, he'd been producing at the BBC. Wonderful things had happened. He'd started in radio. At one point he produced a play for immigrants, for new people who are new to the country, and it was like a soap opera. He thought that would be a good way to reach people and teach them things that they need to know about living here and all the rest of it. And he ended up being burned in effigy on the streets of Wolverhampton, which I thought was rather good. BBC producer, set fire to that. So he really hit some nerves. But he produced wonderful programmes, all for bugger all money.
Yeah.
And he worked in a department of the BBC called Continuing Education, which is basically adult education. But he got in touch with me and he said, look, I've got an idea for a series and I'd like you to do some work as a researcher. And before I could say, I don't think so, he said, I'm going to pay you well, but I need you to work on this. I'll give you, I think I got 60 quid a week. It was quite a bit of money in 1985. Well, it was more than I was getting from playing pubs, probably. Well, it might not have been, actually. No, maybe not. But it was decent bucks. And
additional money.
It was some, yeah, exactly. It was what I had. It was a series that he was planning, which was called Welcome to My World. And it was a drama documentary. And the drama side of it, he'd already cast the actor Robert Powell, who made his name playing Jesus. Yeah. Of course. Lovely actor,
before he got
great
to
guy.
Jasper Carrot, of course.
Yeah, lovely guy, very, very seriously good actor. The premise of the programme was, firstly, the subject matter was information technology. And Paul's point, and it was a very fair one, was that at that point, when television, particularly the BBC where he worked, when they did anything, it was always Tomorrow's World, or they had a programme that has a strand called Micro Live. And it was all about computers. And it was this relentlessly upbeat, optimistic, euphemistic way of describing what you were going to be able to do with computers, information technology in the future. You're going to be able to sit in your armchair and open the curtains without moving.
The theme tune was exactly as you described the programme.
Yeah. It was all kind of relentless crap. And Paul, who had got a brain the size of a planet, was a brilliant researcher. There's so much about him to admire. Wonderful person altogether. He just knew that this was all crap and that computers were going to make life infinitely worse in every single department. This is 1985, remember. This is now nearly 40 years ago. And Welcome to My World had Robert Powell playing an unnamed sort of eminence grise in the year 2020.
Ooh.
And he would be walking through existence as it was in the year 2020, and all of the stuff that computers had led you to will be laid bare in all its grisly detail, and it will be interspersed with actors, with interviews by Robert Powell talking to people supposedly in 2020 about this thing, and it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. Paul wrote all the script, he directed it.
I'd love to see
it. It's fantastic. I've got it on videotape, on VHS, but I don't know if I've ever transferred it to digital. So the programmes were...
Is it not out there somewhere?
I don't know. I mean, Google's your friend,
I mean,
I suppose.
the idea of seeing that programme...
Well, I have to say, the programmes were, the subject matter, so it was 5 of these drama docs, and then the last one was to be a filmed discussion amongst eminent people about the subject. One of whom was Adrian Henry, another of whom was Ralph Steadman, but we'll get to that. So the subjects were warfare. So this was a programme in 1985 that was talking about cruise missiles. It was talking about people sitting, operating as frontline combatants in the manner of somebody playing a computer game. Now, we all know that that's how it's done now. Drones and the rest of it. 1985, 40 fucking years ago. I mean, this was so prescient. Another the programme, a surveillance camera on every street corner. In 1985, you could probably count the number of cameras in London on one hand. It was so rare. You didn't have the idea of a camera outside every bank entrance, every post office, shops, police cameras on every traffic. That's what this programme told you was coming. Being dogged by surveillance, never being out of shot of a camera. It was there. The Big Bang, financial, the City of London being dependent on computers. So in that dramatised scenario, there was a guy, he was buying and selling penny shares, which are still around. They're shares where they have very little intrinsic value, but people buy them in great volumes. He's trading in penny shares, and while he's on his little microcomputer, which of course by then was a BBC Micro, but sort of crappy old personal computer, and he's in his living room online trading, and the kettle fuses in the kitchen, suddenly, and there's a spike down the mains, and it adds, suddenly it goes, and it adds 1,000 noughts to the trade that he's just done, and he hits send, and he's just sold like a billion shares that he didn't own, and the whole global banking system goes into... So it was basically talking about, the Big Bang, Black Friday, all that stuff. That's another one. What else was there? I go on. The one I was involved with, he had me write a paper about information, the future of information technology in the arts. And I wrote quite a detailed thing about things that I saw coming. One of which was electronic altering of actors' performances. Another one, which I really liked, very prophetic, I thought, was... ambient simulation, what we now call IR, where you would, like convolution reverb. So you could sit at home and you'd have a box, so you could, not only did you own a symphonic performance, but you could specify what space you were going to hear it in. Multi-speaker, surround speakers. And so you could say, right, tonight I'm going to listen to Beethoven's Violin Concerto in... the Albert Hall. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to listen to it in the Carnegie Hall. And it would have the exact, which now is perfectly possible, but it's only been possible for the last 8 years or something. We've had that kind of impulse response that you can now embody an entire acoustic space and use it. So I wrote that into my paper, and a lot else besides. And then Paul, I sat down with him and we talked through the dramatisation of that particular episode, and we came up with this idea that and this again around the Robert Powell character, the central event was the Royal Command film performance, and in our scenario everything was set up, the royal family were on their way and all the rest of it, and suddenly the film performance was injuncted because the central actor in this film that was going to be the Royal Command film that night had his performance electronically altered. And he went to the High Court. He took out an injunction on the producers saying, you can't project this, you've changed my performance. And so they had to cancel the Royal Command. Now, in the background, through all of the events in this episode, I was in the CND when I was at school. I was on the Essex Committee of 100. And so I knew that sort of collective action thing. This was a future where live performance was being electronically generated or electronically altered all around.
Like AI. Really.
Like AI, exactly that. 1985 we're talking about here, predicting all this stuff. So performers that believed in human performance and wanted to perform were forced into guerrilla action. They were being replaced by, computer-generated music and crap everywhere. So they formed this thing which was like the Committee of 100. It was called the Choir of 1,000. And it was flash mob stuff. They would turn up on a street corner. An entire symphony orchestra would turn up on a street corner and play just for the hell of being a human being, making human art, because of what was happening. And it was just the most incredible kind of anarchic world that these people were in. And then the final programme was a discussion in a Chinese restaurant in Soho with Adrian Henry and Ralph Steadman being two of the participants, but there was Dilip Hero, the great thinkers, good social philosophers there as well, and just filmed discussing the topics, and that was cut together for the sixth of the six programmes. But the wonder of it is this, that I worked on this thing, I got paid for the research, then it went into production, and Paul said, well, obviously I want you to write the music. Yeah, great, thanks. Okay, I knew you were going to ask me, so I've been thinking it through. I've got a few sketches. It's going to be a string quartet plus a double bass and percussion, and that's so 6 players. I think the budget would stretch to that. He said, yeah, okay, yeah, it's interesting. He said, now, you might think I'm mad here, but I want you to use the computer to write the music. I didn't own a computer. I'd never worked with a computer. I didn't know anything about it. For me, it was all widdly, bleep, bleep. I had no interest in it. I didn't know anything about that world at all. I was not a keyboard player, and it's a keyboard player's world. It was just nothing that was in it for me. And yet, never say no. You have to do it. That's what he said. So I said, okay. I have my doubts, Paul, but I'll go with the concept. But now, I don't have any of the gear, and I can't afford it. So we're going to have to do something about this. So there was a trade fair. I don't know what it was, the big trade fair of the year for the British music industry at Olympia. And I said, we'll go to that and we'll try and blag some gear. So we went there and walking around this thing all day with Paul, who got a business card that said Paul Kriwaczek, Senior Executive Producer, BBC, blah, blah, blah. And because it was continuing education, he could say things like, I will give you a credit at the end of the programme. Now, BBC never did that. Product placement, not allowed, can of Coke, got to be turned around so you can't see the label, all that stuff. You could never say, thanks to the so-and-so corporate, whatever. Continuing education, Paul went out on a limb and said, we're going to do that to get this stuff. So the Roland Corporation lent us equipment, Casio lent us equipment, Yamaha lent us equipment. Everywhere we went, we were ushered in to see the managing director behind, and the deal was done. So 2 days later, van after van showed up outside my house in Kingston-on-Thames. Boxes of this shit came into my house. So after, and I hadn't really settled that. We'd only just moved there. With the 4 kids, life was a totally different thing. It was quite major, and I didn't know where to bloody start. Everything that came with a manual this thick, and and I don't know, samplers, basic, very, very bad 8 meg samplers. They got no bandwidth, and they I think the total sample was 4 seconds or something. Maybe 2 seconds of stereo and 4 seconds in mono or something like that. But, state-of-the-art stuff. And then the most wonderful thing happened. Paul phoned me up and said, I'm really sorry. He said, I've just found out there's going to be an electrician's strike. And we're affected by it. He said, we've been put into turnaround. He said, I don't think we're going to make this program for at least 6 months. And I went, oh, that's terrible. That was it. So I was left with all this kit, so I had time to learn it. And I discovered, centrally, the most important thing, which was that when I was at school, the one thing I was crap at was maths. My principal subjects were Greek, Latin, ancient history, because of the law and all that stuff. They fitted very well. I loved languages, but obviously I was the music scholar, so I did music. And I loved English literature and all of that as well. Modern languages I was fine with. Numbers, not so. I just didn't know. I was badly taught when I was very young. I know that now, but I just didn't get it. What I discovered from having this 6 months of doing all this stuff was that I not only understood how all this stuff worked in numerical terms, but I loved it. I really liked it. And I started recording stuff, and it wasn't widdly widdly bleep bleep, it was conventional musical sounds, synthesis, but I was creating sounds with my ears and, you know, going into interesting areas, but producing music that couldn't have been physically played by a human being at a keyboard, because I was using step time recordings, MIDI recording and that sort of thing. So producing stuff that was slightly removed from reality. And also samples, even though there was very little sample width allowed and not much sample time, but finding sounds, getting things out of the kitchen, creating sounds out of, you know, get an egg whisk and then detune it by 4 octaves and, you know, or you know, all that kind of stuff, messing about with it and coming up with a palette of really strange kind of post-industrial noises that I could work in musically. And I started writing sketches and sending them to Paul. And he got really interested in it. The first thing I wrote, I thought was brilliant. It used a pile driver, but he didn't like that. But after that, everything I wrote a 12-tone sort of theme music that I thought would work throughout the entire series. And he absolutely loved that. Once he started shooting it and sending me rushes and all the rest of it, he and I started working to the rough cut and all the rest of it. He just went overboard. He said, "I just love this stuff. It's great. More. I want this. I want you to do this." So I was commissioned by the BBC to do 5 minutes of music per episode, which is a substantial amount of music. In reality, out of that 5 minutes and much else that he asked me to provide, when everything came out, it was a half-hour programme and it had 25 minutes of my music in it. It was masses of bloody music. It was like through-written. It seemed to me at the time. It was so much music. So the upshot of that was that Paul loved it. It was a very interesting programme anyway, and it had real character. And the BBC liked it enough. They played it 3 times. In 1986, they played it 3 times in 1 year. And in those days, the PRS, the royalty that you got for your music being used on screen, was the same whether it was played at, 4:35 a.m. as it was if it was played at 8:30 on a Saturday night on BBC One. You got the same royalty, whatever. And this was never mainstream television. It was never going to go out in a peak slot. It would go out at 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. But I got the same money. And they played it 3 times in a year. And it got so much music in it that at the end of that year, when I started getting PRS checks, it was, it's like 17 grand. You know what I mean? Bang! Whoa! I couldn't believe it. So much money because he'd used so much of the music. BBC just paid out. That was the royalty that they paid on music. So it really worked for me. So the first thing I did was go back to the manufacturer and say, this stuff that I borrowed from you from the trade fair last year, and I've had it for a year now, can we set a price? I think I'll hang on to some of it. So I bought all the stuff I wanted to buy out of all that gear that I'd used to make all this money. So then I got the kit to carry on doing this.
The High Court spoiled its night out. Electronic actors. Are they putting film stars out of work? Computers in the arts. What's left for people to do?
Preparations for the Royal Film premiere were still going ahead this afternoon, in spite of growing doubts that the occasion would take place as planned. The manager of the Enterprise Cinema in London's Leicester Square said that until instructed to the contrary, he would continue to expect the royal couple to arrive on schedule. Stringent security was called for after reports that an organisation calling itself the Choir of 1,000 may try to stop the film being shown. A spokesman for the police would not confirm or deny that threats had been received, but said that the security forces were prepared to deal with any trouble. The Choir of 1,000 opposes the use of computer technology in the arts. It claims that the film Time Walk has broken a long-standing agreement in the film industry that all purely computer-generated characters should be labelled as such.
Time Walk. They came out of the past. They brought terror into the present. There was only one way to stop them. To travel back into the past and destroy them. Time Walk. Not a film for the faint-hearted.
It was to have been a big night tonight. The royal film premiere of a new movie, Time Walk. Technically, it's the most ambitious film ever. Everybody says it marks the rebirth of the British film industry. It's all gone rather wrong.
The High Court has granted an injunction to actor David Wise, the star of Time Walk, to stop any public showing of the film on television or in the cinema until its legal position is clarified. A solicitor acting on behalf of the star said the court had agreed that the law was unclear and that opportunity should be given for legal argument to be heard. Until then, all public performance would be suspended.
My client has been advised that an actor has a commercial interest not only in his performance, but also in his actual physical appearance. It is an infringement of those rights for a third person to create and display a computer-generated representation of the actor's performance without his consent.
So the star's happy, and the police are happy. They won't have to worry about maintaining public order and protecting the VIPs in the face of threats of disruption by the Choir of 1,000. And the Choir of 1,000 are happy. It's a victory in their campaign to keep technology out of the arts.
The only player in the whole drama who can't be happy about the way things turned out is the producer. And he'll get over it.
All I asked for were a few tiny changes in his performance in 4 scenes. And he wouldn't. Or maybe he couldn't. I mean, who's in charge of the film? Who pays for it? The actor or the producer? Now, at the end of the day, if I'd had to reshoot that scene, I'd have had to reconstruct the set, recall all the crew, all the extras, costumes, makeup. I'd have put another $1 million on the budget. All I did was make a few electronic changes to get the effect I wanted. Big deal. And what's so terrible about that?
The real revolution of the information age will not be one of hardware, but of the human spirit.
In the information age, it's machines which serve people. People are not asked to serve anymore. In 1,000 automated factories, 1 million robots, intelligent but mindless, faithfully follow every order to the letter. in 1,000 company head offices, 1 million computer workstations, silent but obedient, wait with infinite patience for their next instruction. Only in the arts must we still depend on unpredictable and unreliable human powers. In music, painting, drama, dance. And now, that's changing too.
What can we do to change it, you reckon?
Resample it or resynthesize it?
That's basic sounds, all right. How long would resynthesis take then?
Hours.
Maybe we should have used real musicians.
Well, they say that's the price of progress.
Yeah.
So this is my world, and welcome to it. Your future is whatever you choose to make it. I should remind you, though, you've already taken quite a few steps along the path that leads to here.
In the beginning, the computer's creations were basic and crude, no more than you would expect of a machine. But we learned to teach it clever tricks.
Let me tell you a little word about a day computer. Let me tell you a little word about a day computer.
And slowly, we learned to write the rules to simulate creation.
Rules for creating by computer are well known, but we don't know how to make the computer evaluate what it produces.
Now we've discovered ways to feed machines with the contents of our own imagination. And profit to be had in offering the public constant stimulation.
If I make a movie about space, they want to see Saturns outside the window. They demand landscapes that couldn't exist outside their imagination.
In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alf, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea.
They want action that involves impossible machines and simple people. And how else can I give them what they want without using whatever technology can give me?
That is the genius of the modern magic lantern. Your every wish is its command. Manipulate the input, change the parameters, modify the algorithm, and you can be sure of getting what you like in the style you like it, whenever you like it.
It's clear that in order to produce a work of art that is in some way interesting and worthwhile, you have to have a system, whether it being a human artist or a computer, that has two things. It has skill about how to generate the work of art, draw the picture or whatever. And second, that it has a great deal of knowledge about the world, so that the art can be about something that is interesting to us human beings. And it's clear that we can produce computers that have both of those. And so there's every reason to believe that we can make computers produce interesting works of art.
There was trouble at the Hemsworth Fine Art Gallery in Dover Street today when a man armed with a hatchet tried to break past security guards and attack the pictures. The gallery owner said that though the pictures were computer-generated, they were irreplaceable, since the chances of a machine producing the same image twice were billions to one against. When arrested, the intruder claimed to belong to the organization known as the Choir of 1,000.
Harold Cohen, who was an English painter. He was a traditional painter originally, who went to California and got involved in the artificial intelligence scene there. And he started to produce a computer program that would draw pictures and would have some sort of connection to reality. And he gave the computer concepts about lines, objects, about the fact that one thing, when it is in front of another, obstructs the view of it. And what's the difference between up and down? What's the idea of one object sitting on top of another? And he produced a computer program called Aaron that was producing something quite unlike anything that had been possible before.
I can program all my instruments to produce electronic music with the help of computers.
I find from my own work as a composer that that's tedious and irrelevant. I think it's much more interesting to actually use the resources of the computer working as a thinking object which is assisting you with aspects of its intelligence which you can control and manipulate to generate compositions which are actually using the resources of the machine to develop new styles and new approaches to composition. So I can use a computer program. I need only specify a couple of points to start off at a limit, a couple of points to finish a limit, and then the computer can fill up all the gaps in between. And that can even be extended further so that the computer itself is choosing the limits and building up long chains of shaped sets of sound. And that can apply not only to how high or low the notes are, but also how long the notes are, whether there's lots of them or a few of them, how dense the resulting sound is, and the sort of types of sound which are being used to play those notes.
In a world where ultimate reality resides in the circuits of machines, people have to learn to think like machines. They have to learn to behave like machines. They have to learn to feel like machines and respond to experience like machines. It's the computer arts which are teaching us how. In the past, the arts laid claim to reflect the lives and values of the people. The image in the mirror was distorted by the artist's human imagination. Who these days wants to explore reality? Who wants to see what actually surrounds us now? Isn't there more beauty and more value to be found in the exacting mathematics of the machine?
Fire broke out at the Online Music Centre in London's Dockland this morning. The centre, which pipes computer music direct to shops and other public places, has been completely destroyed. The fire brigade says that arson was the only possible cause. The Choir of 1,000, who oppose the use of computers in the arts, say that they were not responsible for the outrage, that it was no surprise if people were being forced to take the law into their own hands. The organisation is stepping up its drive to recruit new members.
What are the issues that face the Choir of 1,000? Are they political? Are they social? Are they religious? Or is it just the control of a technology fallen into the wrong hands?
In some ways it's liberating, in some ways it's threatening. I wouldn't want to be thrown out of work any more than anybody else. But I happen to think that my kind of creative edge is that much greater than any computers.
I mean, technology is neither liberating nor imprisoning. It's depending on who owns the technology. And fewer people own it. and therefore they remain in work. And
is that
luckily
true?
surely
More and more people own it, the way that things are going.
More and more people don't own the technology. More and more people own the toys the technology produces. More and more people do not own the technology that produces things that other people want.
Manual work into machine work into paperwork into electronic simulations of work, divorced from any human purposes except those that further the power system.
What can you say to a human poet, painter, or musician? When now a computer can write you a novel, poem, piece of music, make you a print, painting, sculpture, or just possibly something we haven't even thought of yet.
Down is a lifetime in every direction, orbiting, dreaming of haven. Sunburst, starburst, lost among stardust, lost in the empty ocean between the galaxies. I broke beside the beginning, dreaming of haven. Mercury, Earth, Uranus, Pluto, lost among stardust. I travel with comets. I weep no tears. Sunburst, starburst, spindrift, star drift. I broke beside the beginning.
You could see it very early on. You could see it certainly in the 1970s and 80s when we did generate music. We found that session musicians and then orchestras weren't needed. The conductor wasn't needed anymore. You didn't need anyone intervening between that composer, new or old, and the bit of music you were playing anymore. And it was only in live performances of theatre and live performances of ballet and dance that any form of real art actually existed. But even now, that is fading away, because it is so much easier to watch it either on your video screen at home or in some form of other cinema, because nowadays you can actually have Nureyev brought back to you in a ballet. It's just been recreated. So the whole essence of the soul and the spirit of a nation, of a person, representing art, representing the soul of people, has gone.
At last, an age-old dream is realized. Art is for all. You don't have to be rich or fashionable, educated or intelligent. The audience is everybody now because art is infinitely repeatable and cheap. It's cheap enough to have music, pictures, poems in every supermarket, airport terminal, every restaurant, pub, club, church, dentist waiting room. Wherever the public go, and need to be pacified, excited, amused, uplifted. Unlike people, machines never question their orders.
Musicians, I'm glad to have seen the back of them. And the same goes for writers and painters. I'm running a business here, not a not a rest home for antisocial misfits. If I'd wanted to work with drunks or dope smokers or people who were in trouble with the police, I'd have been a social worker. And I don't like having to argue the toss with my employees all the time. Artistic integrity, emotional expression, it's all bullshit. Art is just another product. People want to buy, I want to sell.
Hey, let's go crazy. We are gonna have fun tonight. Wow, it's playing by itself. But it's like a wave.
But we're talking about something different. We're talking about physical presence, aren't we? You go to Amsterdam and you go to look at Van Gogh paintings because you want to see the actual physical presence of that picture. And it's not the same as having a glossy coffee table picture book.
Because it seems to possess something which, so far as we know, the machine does not yet possess, which is a soul.
If you think about it, the ideal form of film is the cartoon, because everything that appears on the screen is totally under the control of the filmmaker. He doesn't actually have to find a thing to photograph. He can generate something out of his own imagination. If you think about a field of grass, the usual way of making it would be to draw every blade individually, which takes a very long time. If you simply give the computer one blade of grass and say, copy it 1,000,000 times, it will look absurdly unrealistic. But if you tell the computer, here's a sort of generalized blade of grass, draw 1,000,000 of them, but make each one slightly different according to a random formula, then you can produce a field of grass that looks amazingly realistic.
It's all crap and horse manure. A painter's not interested merely in the surface appearance of things. I'm seeking the inner truth.
But isn't the machine just another tool for an artist to use, like a more flexible brush?
The only person who'd say something like that, somebody who's never held a brush in their life. You can't distance yourself from the image. All a computer produces is a crass electronic cartoon.
How so?
Well, canvas, paper, they're not just surfaces to make marks on. A painting, a drawing, not just lines on a piece of paper. The whole thing has to be a complete entity. Or would you prefer it in the words of Thomas Traherne? You'll never enjoy the world aright till the sea itself flows in your veins, till you're clothed with the heavens and crowned with the stars.
The computer is a very different technology from those that artists have always used. And it's different because it requires the artist to instruct it to produce the work of art, rather than the artist combining their emotional skills, their intellectual skills, their physical skills, and being a vehicle through which their human spirit is being communicated, to one in which they're having to separate out lots of those things by having to change their center of attention and focusing on instructing the machine to do the work for them. It becomes difficult to distinguish the work that's being looked at, whether it comes from a computer or whether it's come directly from a human being. And the danger of that is that we can then regard computer art and, if you like, human art as being the same thing, and that humans are nothing more than sophisticated computers.
Machines work by logic. You know, it's mechanical logic. And the great human discoveries, you know, I suspect scientific discoveries as much as artistic discoveries, have always been an imaginative leap made by somebody.
Let's go, everyone!
Surely there's something missing here. Surely when a human being produces a work of art, there is something coming from his, shall we say, soul. There is some sort of aspect of the human spirit there that we can't imagine being present in silicon. Well, that may be, but of course the interesting thing is that nowadays not many people really admit to believing in the human soul. If they're pushed, they will say that human beings are simply machines. And therefore, why shouldn't a machine made out of silicon end up just as complicated and just as powerful as a human artist?
There is no point in building a machine with the intelligence of a man, since it is easier to construct human brains by the usual method. We should therefore build a machine that can far surpass all the intellectual activities of any man, however clever.
The computer manufacturers, the technology manufacturers, are selling us an idea of a super being who will be better than all of us and any of us.
Yeah.
And that's frightening.
I'm sure it'll happen. There'll be a computer that will
That's
actually
what they're
think for
aiming
itself. That's what they want. They will recreate man in his own image. It's God creating himself. We no longer believe in God, or lots of people don't. So we want a new God. And the new God will be a computer that will tell us exactly what it wants to tell us and will never grow old.
You might think that what computers do in the arts isn't the most important item on your agenda. But music, painting, and poetry have always been the most human of our activities. If the machine has taken over here too, perhaps computing professor Marvin Minsky got it right. He believed that very soon we'd be able to program computers first with thoughts and then with feelings and emotions. The result? His words, not mine. We will have a machine which will be able to read Shakespeare, grease a car, play office politics, tell a joke, have a fight. At that point, it will begin to educate itself with fantastic speed. In a few months, it will be at genius level, and a few months after that, its power will be incalculable. He thought that when we built it, it might want to keep us on as pets. Doubt it.